Okay, welcome everyone to my Sailor Sundays. And today, or this evening in Austria, we have Bjarne Hansen and his wife Barb Peck, who will be joining us a little bit later in the slideshow to talk about their sailing past. So Bjarne, I found out that you were involved in sailing just, I guess it was last month when you gave a talk to your local, I think it was your local sailing association. And it was just amazing, the slides that you posted. And I thought, if I ever get off my, if I ever get going on what I want to do as far as interviewing classmates on sailing, you are going to be way up there as someone I wanted to talk to. So here we are tonight. And how long have you been sailing and how did you get into it?
I've been sailing, well, probably since I was born, actually. My dad, he built a boat when we were up in Greenland. I'd just been born then. And so I've always been around diesel engines and boats for a long time. Sailing in particular, though, was in Powell River when we bought a 22-foot Catalina as a family. And my sister and I occasionally got to take it out on weekends without our parents along. And so gradually became familiar with sailing in the local coastal waters around here.
Oh,
And
cool.
then
And where
that
is
led
here? Where is here now?
yes, I'm actually living in Victoria right now.
Okay.
Technically Esquimalt, about
Okay.
3 kilometers from CFB Naden.
Okay, so but you've given me some beautiful slides that I put together in a PowerPoint presentation. I was going to start to go through them to and then ask you questions as I go, as they pop into my head. But before we start off with the slideshow, if you could just quickly run through the sailing that you and Barb have done together over your life, and maybe your first sailboat and how things have progressed over the years, to give us the background and
Okay, yeah, I can do that. We met actually at a Navy mess dinner in Kingston at RMC, the Sea Cadet camp there. Barb was working as a instructor at, and they were holding a mess dinner. As an Air Force officer, newly minted, was searching for social opportunities and thought that it might be worth the getting ribbed a little bit, being the only Air Force person at a Navy function. But it turned out fine. Met Barb there, and we've been an item since then, pretty much. The
wow.
sailing we did together was, I guess it started out with Barb. She owned a windsurfer, which I was very impressed with, and I had a kayak, which she thought was kind of neat. We progressed from that to about a 16-foot towable catamaran, very similar to a Hobie Cat, but not that brand. It was an Australian brand. And then gradually moved into time-sharing keel boats when we were living in London, Ontario, and sailing them on Lake Huron.
Oh,
We took
cool.
the summer off in the year 2000 before we moved out to Victoria. We took that summer off and went sailing up in the North Channel, northern Lake Huron, which was great cruising grounds. And we called that one Summer Fling, and had that had that boat actually shipped out here to the West Coast, where we sailed it for a few years before buying the next bigger one, which was a 30-foot one called Freya. That's the boat that we took to the South Pacific. We sailed it as far as New Zealand before turning around and coming back. And that was in 2004, 5, and 2006. We came back in 2006 to replenish the cruising kitty, worked for a few years with just local sailing. And then in 2015, we took Hokupa, which is our current 35-foot Niagara sailboat. We took that one down to Mexico and did a bunch of cruising in the Sea of Cortez during the winters, and just came back due to COVID. We would have headed on to
Okay.
French Polynesia from there, but plans have to be flexible. So
Yeah,
there we go.
exactly. COVID threw a wrench into a lot of people's plans, but okay, well, that sounds amazing. And how many miles have you logged over your sailing career, if you will, Do you keep
If
track or
somewhere
no?
north of 30,000, I would think. I know the trip to the South Pacific, it was I think it was about 8,000 miles to get to New Zealand, and probably a little bit more coming back because we zigzagged and visited places like Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, the Line Islands, which was Christmas Island, Tabuaran, before heading up to Hawaii and back home again. So there was a whack of miles there, and then heading down to Mexico and back again. I know coming back was just about 3,300 miles. So
Wow.
yeah, it's probably somewhere 30,000 and a little bit, I imagine.
Cool. Okay. And in this, so let's start our slideshow, and I'll just keep asking questions as we go. And we'll hear about your sailing journey, and then I'll just jump in with questions about your experiences, etc. So this is your Hokupa. So this is your most recent sailboat that you own, you said. And how long have you had her?
We bought her in 2014 and outfitted her to head down specifically to Mexico because when we went on our South Pacific trip, we bypassed Mexico. It was a bit of an untraditional routing. We went via Hawaii and then directly into the South Pacific rather than going through Mexico. So we thought this time we'd go see Mexico. The Sea of Cortez we'd heard a lot about. It's got wonderful wildlife. So this is us heading down to San Francisco from the west coast of the island. That was a nice, fast 6-day passage to get to the Golden Gate.
Cool. Yeah. So that, I think, is our next slide, is the Golden Gate Bridge. So you said it
Good
was,
timing there, yeah.
yes. So speaking of the Golden Gate, and you said it was 6-day passage?
Yeah, 6 days and 20 minutes. We would have been under 6 days if we hadn't had to hold back for a couple of freighters that were heading up the channel there. We didn't want to tangle with them. So
No, absolutely not.
prudence and all that, yeah.
So the two of you has pretty much sailed, just the two of you. Is that correct? Or do you take crew on board when you go on these long passages?
We haven't had crew on passages before, so it does make the first 3 or 4 days a little bit more difficult, perhaps, because of disruption in our sleep. We always have somebody on watch, so we're alternating every 2, 3, or 4 hours.
Yeah.
Who gets
How do
to
you
be,
how do you decide your watch rotation? Like how do you just kind of judge it by the weather and such and shorten it
yeah,
up
it's
when you're
some people prefer a more rigid watch keeping, by the clock kind of system. That's probably more true if you have like formal crew, but between the two of us, we just either rock, paper, scissors it, or whoever's feeling more awake than the other person, or whoever's at a more exciting part in their book will volunteer to stand watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have an auto helm, is that correct?
We have 2 ways of steering the boat when we're at sea. One is totally non-electric. It's a wind vane. We call
Okay.
her Helena. Most boat parts are actually named, you'll find when you talk to yachties.
Yeah.
And so Helena does 95% of our steering when we're underway. The only time that she's not very useful is if there's no wind, and in which case we're motoring. And in that case, we'll turn on the electric autopilot, and we have one of those as well.
Okay.
We call her Roberta. For
Roberta.
Roberta.
Elena and Roberta. Excellent. Okay. So moving on, is this is Hokupa as well? Or
Let's see. No, this would be Freya, the
okay.
30-foot double ender that we took down to New Zealand. And I am not sure where exactly we took that picture, but you can see some of the typical accoutrements. We had solar panels for power. There's one
Yeah.
at the stern, one on deck. And the wind vane that's doing the steering has that tan-shaped piece of rectangular plywood sticking up in the air there at the stern. That's what catches and detects the direction the wind's coming from.
Okay. And how did the solar panels work out for you? Did you find that you got enough power from the sun that you were able to run what you needed to run? And what did you run?
Well, yeah, we've been pretty independent of needing to use the engine for power, particularly on this boat we have now. With Freya, we had probably about 140 watts worth of solar panels. Remember, this was back in 2004, so they were quite expensive. One of them, the small one lying on the deck there, the 50 watt, I think we paid $800 and some odd for it.
Wow.
And then regrettably, we threw that one overboard in New Zealand when we had not tied it down properly. So we had to buy a new one. That was a little bit painful, but
yes.
we got over it. And it was an occasion for a bunch of other folks to come together to hunt for it. We scuba dived down the 30 feet or so looking for it. We didn't find it, but it was a fun social event anyway, and the source of much good-natured ribbing.
Nice.
Anyway,
Yeah, you don't want to make that mistake twice, I guess. Wow.
no, it was a good lesson in just keeping up with maintenance. Like the clips that held the panel on had corroded, and we knew that they were going to fail soon. So we had bought replacements for it. We just hadn't got around to installing them.
Okay.
And like a lot of things, if you neglect them, the maintenance, then it can reach up and bite you.
Yeah, speaking of which, I'm not sure if the next slide is a sailing slide. Yeah, it is. Okay. With regards to maintenance, how do you work it out when it's just the two of you? If you've got repairs and maintenance that you have to do while you're making the passage? Just
Well, a lot of things can be done while you're actually actively sailing underway. I guess there's a couple of exceptions when we have actually hove to and or stopped the boat. And one would be if we need to send one of us up the mast to correct something. I think that's probably happened 2 or 3 times total. And the other times was we were taking on water through a open hawse pipe that is an opening where the anchor chain runs through down into the bow.
right.
And that water was actually starting to soak our V-berth cushions. So we needed to seal that up. So I hopped up onto the bow with a little hand drill, not an electric one, and started drilling through 1/4-inch stainless steel with
Oh,
some drill bits. So that was a good 2.5-hour operation in
wow.
bouncy seas, but we just had to do it because that was making sleeping just very uncomfortable.
Yeah, wow. That's yeah, I can imagine. And you definitely want to get that leak stopped for sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned heaving two, Hove two. Maybe you can spend a minute telling the audience, the non-sailing audience, what that is and how often you ended up having to do that over your passage. I know that, especially I've heard with 1 or 2 crew, that is a way to get rest, etc. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a well-known technique amongst long-distance sailors, because what you do is if you're either too tired to sail effectively, or the weather is just so snotty that you're not making any progress at all, you may as well just stop and get some rest. So what you do is you set your sails, and how you do that depends a little bit on the design of the boat, like the shape of the keel and the relative areas of your foresail and the mainsail. But basically you set them so that you're making very, very slow forward progress of maybe like a 1/4 knot or so, and your bow is pointing at about a 45-degree angle into the wind or so.
mhm.
And once you've rigged the boat that way, because you're moving quite slowly, and because your bow is still able to split most of the waves that are coming towards you, then it gets a lot more comfortable. And then you've actually, in our case, we feel comfortable enough that we can both go to sleep, and maybe just keep a lookout every half hour or hour or so, instead of having someone continually on watch like we do when we're actually making way.
And how many times do you recall having to use it? 1 for sleep, 2 for weather.
I would say, well, this picture here was actually taken on the way from Hawaii to the Marquesas, and we did heave to on that trip because we had a sustained probably 4 or 5 days of winds that were above 30 knots, and
Wow.
they were hitting 40 knots at times. We were heading to windward, because if you look on a chart, you'll see that we actually had to make some easting to get towards the Marquesas from Hawaii. And we had done a bit of a strategic error there in deciding, first of all, to go there, but also in leaving just after there was a hurricane. I think Hurricane I can't remember the name of it. It had formed near Mexico and then headed towards Hawaii. It petered out before it hit Hawaii, but there was still very jumbled seas and just winds that were shifty and confused in that for quite a while afterwards. So that was one instance when we actually hove to just for the night, because we were just so tired of getting beat up and
Yeah.
beating to weather. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've done it a couple times since then. It's not very frequent, but it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I've read about it in sailors' books that I've read on long passages. It's just a way to yeah, really either ride out the weather or get that rest that is needed in order to be able to continue. So, okay. So is there anything else you want to mention about this picture here that we have? This is not Freya.
Yeah, this is Freya, and
Right,
we're
okay,
just
right.
scooting along. Probably, she
Oh
was
yeah, you
a
said Marquesa, right,
fast
right.
boat. Would This would have been, like I say, on the passage to the Marquesas. Probably we're doing about 6 or 7 knots in winds that were blowing 25 or maybe 30 knots. Looking at the seas right now, yeah, 25 knots I would say. So it was we were moving along pretty good. Our furthest 24-hour distance we made in that boat was 154 miles, so we were quite pleased with that.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh,
She was
incredible.
running for the barn. We're headed for New Zealand from Niue, and by then we had been underway for 3.5 months. We were very comfortable with the boat and what it could handle, what we could handle. So we just left the sail up and just pedal to the metal, and we did 154 miles in one day. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, that's amazing. I had a thought and it just came and went, but I'm sure I'll remember what I was going to ask you in one of the next slides. So, okay, what do we have here? This is a gorgeous picture here. Tell us about this.
Yep, this was in Penryn, in one of the northern Cook Islands. So after we left the Marquesas, we headed west towards New Zealand, and the first stop is in the Cook Islands, probably about 5 or 6 days away. And yeah, the lagoon there is just gorgeous. A lot of the coral atolls have scenery that can look like this. This was our first coral atoll that we'd ever been to, and it consists of a coral ring circling a central lagoon that can be several miles or many more miles in diameter. The water inside is typically quite shallow, quite beautiful, great for snorkeling.
Oh, very nice. Just beautiful. It is gorgeous. And yeah, what's the story behind this? There's this one and the next one with some children. And I was wondering.
We found, well, one of the challenges when you come into a new country is being able to communicate with the locals. And I mean, it's a bit of a North American centric viewpoint, but English is actually a commonly spoken language, but it's much more fun to be able to learn some of the words in the local languages. And so we found that interacting with the kids was an easy way to pick up words, and particularly because well, their vocabulary is actually a little bit better than yours, but you want kids words, you don't need adult words.
Right.
And they're very friendly, and they're quick to let you know if you're pronouncing something wrong. So we would often just try to chat with the kids in that. And we noticed one weird thing about them in the South Pacific, and it was regardless of what island group we were in, whenever you got a camera out, they would always have some sort of hand gesture that they would be doing in the that you would see in the
Oh, really?
viewfinder.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, they got their thumbs
Inevitable.
up. I was
Yeah.
wondering what that was all about. So that's just their way to pose for a camera, I guess, eh? Interesting.
Yeah.
And where is this again? Where was this photo taken? Do you recall?
I think that one would have been in Fiji, maybe.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And this next one, what here, let me see if I can.
There's that's seaweed harvesting, and that's a cash crop at Tabuaran, also called Fanning Island. It's one of the line islands just north of the equator and south of Hawaii. They harvest the seaweed and ship it off. It's used, they extract carrageenan from it, one of the ingredients in ice cream and other sort of things.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's just another day at work here for them, and they were kind enough to let us take their picture.
Very nice. And the sand looks just beautiful, just spectacular.
Yep.
Okay.
A lot of the coral atolls have that white sand, which is typical of just ground up coral. So it's usually quite white. Yeah.
And this is some sort of performance or festival, or what was happening?
Yeah. These are Maori, the indigenous folks in New Zealand, doing a evening show of what their some of their cultural dances and songs were. So it was quite a fun little evening there. You can see some of the tattooing it's big with the
Okay.
Maori.
Yeah, and
And
was
this
this also the same?
no, this is in Samoa. It's
Oh, okay.
called Siva Afi, or fire knife dancing. What they do is they have a pole that's tipped with a knife at one end and a torch at the other end, and they're twirling it very quickly, um, doing all sorts of neat baton-like moves with it. It's fun to watch,
Wow.
and there's actual national competitions in that kind of performance. So it's great to watch.
Incredible. So this was some flying fish that just landed on the boat, or what's the story behind this?
Yeah, quite often when you're sailing in tropical waters, the flying fish will be disturbed by the sight of your hull approaching them. So traditionally, to get away from predators, they'll try to become airborne. So they will actually head up into the air, and with those big um, fins, if you will, they will actually be able to glide or fly for hundreds of feet. If the conditions are right. So sometimes they will misjudge what direction they're headed for, and they'll actually land on your deck, and then next morning you'll see them dead there.
Yeah, actually, I think Trevor mentioned that there were flying fish. I think he mentioned that. And the next one is you kissing a flying fish, or
Yeah,
that was it. That was the
I,
one that just landed on your deck again.
yes, that's right.
Cool.
Some people eat them for breakfast. We preferred other breakfast things like muffins and so forth. Yeah.
And how were your fishing skills? I see this very large fish. I don't know what kind it was or it is, but
I think that one was a rainbow runner, or at least that's what it was called locally. This was down in Tonga area, and our fishing skills are mediocre. We wouldn't
okay.
try, or wouldn't catch a whole lot, but we would do it once in a while. You trail a line behind the boat and see what comes along. Some more often than not, you'd just be pulling in a fish head, because inevitably, if a fish does take your hook, then its thrashing about will attract some bigger predator that will then come along and nip it
Scoop
up
it.
in the bud. So you have
Oh,
to be quick
really?
to reel him in time. Yes.
Oh, interesting. So very interesting. And here's some more wildlife. This is what kind of whale is? Looks
That
like
was
a
a
whale.
humpback.
Okay.
The humpbacks will often go into tropical waters like around Tonga to have their babies, and
Okay.
then once the calves get old enough, then they'll do their migrations to either the southern polar or the northern polar waters to actually feed, because the polar waters are actually much more rich in the plankton and
Mhm.
krill and stuff that they eat. But it's fun to watch the humpbacks in those areas, in the tropical areas, because they tend to move quite sedately. They're not hunting for food. They're just educating their young, communicating. You can often hear them singing when you're snorkeling. You pop your head, 4 or 5 feet underwater, and you can hear the whale songs. It's very cool.
Oh, wow. And there's another one. Is that same a humpback, or is that a different?
Yes, yeah, that's also a humpback.
Oh, wow. It's spectacular. Did you have any run-ins, any scary situations with whales or sharks or anything over your sailing journey or journeys?
They are a bit intimidating, because the whales outweigh our boat, by quite a few orders of magnitude. The I guess there was one night when we were sailing under spinnaker in the Tongan island group from towards the north, and I think we were only doing about 4 knots or so. The winds were quite light, and 2 humpbacks came alongside us, and they were within. We could have reached them with a boat hook, like, so
Oh,
they
wow.
were 2 meters or less from our hull, and that was initially a little bit scary, but they seemed to know exactly where we were, and they didn't hit us or anything. They just
Mm,
accompanied us for a good 20 minutes or so, and
wow.
we could hear them talking to each other. It was very special. Yeah.
I wonder if they could hear the two of you talking to each other.
Well, we were wondering about that because at the time we'd been playing some Celtic music
Ah,
on a CD player, and undoubtedly through the hull they can probably hear the whatever we're playing. So
yes.
it's a good thing they liked whatever our choices were.
Well, and I've heard stories of sailboats being rammed by whales out at sea, and yeah, I think even
Yeah,
sunk.
it's
So
we've heard it, and and we've seen the aftermath of it too.
okay.
It is something that's a bit scary, and uh, it's a I guess a bit of a downside to the fact that we've stopped whaling now generally, and that
Yeah.
the numbers of whales are increasing in the global waters. I mean, I'm happy to see the wildlife returning, but it's adding a little bit to the the dangers, because the whales they will often rest at the surface of the water sleeping, and if you're barreling along at 6 knots and you hit one of those, it
Yeah.
stops your boat very quickly, and
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
cause some damage. That and hitting shipping containers that have fallen overboard from
Hmm.
cargo ships.
Hmm.
Those were our main fears at sea. We generally uh, felt quite fine being out of sight of land, but those are two of the hazards that were sort of at the back of our mind. But there's a lot of pluses too, and really, I think if you looked at the chances of actually having a bad collision, it's probably less in a boat than it would be if you're driving a car on the 401 or something like that.
Right. Well, yes. Okay, and here's another picture of wildlife. This is just spectacular. This is a pelican or
Yep, down in Sea Cortez, lots of pelicans there, and you wouldn't believe how many frames one has to try to take to catch a pelican just before it hits the water before you actually get one. But we went through hundreds of shots, but finally
and
got one.
here I thought this was just the one shot that you took that just captured it beautifully. It's spectacular.
No, we'd often be anchored, and you'd hear the sound, something like a size of a Christmas turkey hitting the water from 30 feet up. A big sploosh, and it would be
Wow.
a pelican diving after small fish, and that. Yeah, they occasionally misjudge it too, and so you would see on the beach sometimes pelicans that were dead, presumably like a broken neck or some
Oh,
mishap, yeah, when they hit the water at probably 20 miles an hour or so.
oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, what do we have next? So this is the top view. I think this is where I saw the solar panels that I knew you had solar panels. What's
Yeah,
going on here? This is it's
we
just
had uh, we had just arrived in Radio Bay in the Big Island of Hawaii after a trip from Victoria that took us 28 days, as I recall. And we're drying stuff out and just checking over the rigging, making sure nothing's broken in the passage. We tended to do a mechanical check of the important parts of the boat just after a big passage or just before the next big one, just to make sure that we catch anything early on.
so you said it was a 28-day passage. So
Yes, it's about 2,350 miles direct from Victoria to Hawaii, but most boats don't sail in a direct line because of the wind patterns
right.
being what they are. So usually you would head offshore several hundred miles, follow the northwest winds down until about the latitude of San Francisco, and then turn right and head downwind until you get to Hawaii. So yeah, in our case,
Not
we took 28 days.
not quite the same as Trevor, where you say you go south until the butter melts and then you turn right for the
Yeah.
I was wondering what you do for water on board for those long passages. Do you have a water maker?
On Freya, we didn't. We carried a bit over 200 liters of water in our keel tanks, and there were some jerry jugs. You can see the blue
Yeah.
jerry jugs on deck there.
Okay.
So we had enough water for probably about 6 weeks, we
Okay.
estimated, without catching rainwater. And that was a backup plan.
That's going to be
catching
my
rain.
question, was whether or not you ever caught rainwater for drinking.
We did sometimes, yeah. More often we would catch the rainwater just for showering. Like you would just
Okay.
strip down and just stand in the tropical shower, get the shampoo out, and
Right.
get clean. It was
Right.
quite a joy.
And I've heard people use it to wash their decks, and then after that they collect the rainwater if they're going to collect. So Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Let's see what we have next. Oh, I think it's Barb's turn to jump in. Is Barb around? I have some questions that I want to ask her specifically, and then I'll bring you back in and we'll
Okay,
have the two of you carry on together for the rest of the interview.
sure.
So,
Just stand by a couple. I'll go get her.
okay, great. And thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I should put a necklace on her hand. Oh, you should leave, I guess.
Hello, Barb.
Hi.
We're not rehearsing this. If everyone who's watching is wondering what's going on, it's because we're just doing it straight up. We're not going to cut it and edit it. So thank you so much, Barb, for agreeing to be interviewed. I know I just threw this at you at the last minute, but I really want to get the female perspective and the other half on a sailing voyage, because oftentimes, as I've been reading, they're long passages, and to have a spouse that you can convince to go along on these journeys with you, it can really make it a very, very pleasant lifestyle and life. So wanted to ask, Bjorn had mentioned that you were a sea cadet instructor out in Kingston. And my ears immediately pricked up, because after I retired from the military, I became a sea cadet officer back in 2016, 8 years after I retired. And I love it. I love being on the water with the cadets. And so I was wondering what your sailing background was prior to meeting Bjorn.
Yeah. Before I answer that, I just want to double check. I wasn't clear who your audience was, and that might affect how much I think I need to explain something,
So
or whatever.
It's pretty much our class, our Armed Sea Cadet class, but it is a publicly available YouTube video that I'm posting. And so it is for whoever Googles us. I think that typically the college ex-cadets are the ones who I think are accessing it. But that's a very good question.
Okay.
It's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, fair enough. I'll think about your primary audience.
Yes.
More so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. So my sailing. So I was in Sea Cadets, and that's where I got exposed to sailing.
Mhm.
So and actually sailing out of RMC was most of the places where I learned to sail. Because we have a cadet, I think they still do even a cadet camp there in the summertime.
Yes, I've been an officer at the cadet camp, and I do the sailing on the weekends, spring and fall. So it's good fun.
So that was my exposure to sailing, was dinghy sailing, and I became a sail instructor. And then that's how I met Bjorn, because he was just finishing up. He had just finished his 4 years at finished up his undergrad, and I was working at the camp that summer, and he was doing some job there. So we met. He managed to sneak into a mess dinner somehow that we were having with our camp, and so anyways, that's where we met. So we both came to it with an interest in sailing separately. He probably talked about his already. So
yeah, he mentioned that you had a windsurfer that he admired, and he had a kayak that you had that you liked as well. So that was interesting.
Also, he told me that his parents had a sailboat, and it was he mentioned it. I mean, now I know what that means. It was 22-foot Catalina, so it was a small boat, but one with a cabin and so on. But that just seems so, wow, you got a sailboat, so amazing to me. So
yeah, nice. And did you get to sail it?
I was out on that once when I visited in the winter time, and there was no wind, and we just motored around a little bit.
Okay.
So not really.
So you when did the two of you start talking about your sailing adventures, or did it just work in as you got out on the water and spending more time together that you started to expand your horizons and what you wanted to achieve as a sailing couple?
Yes, it was something that progressed, but we were both interested in it to start with. And like I remember early on, when you're having these conversations about things you're interested in and so on, saying, "Whoa, wouldn't it be neat to be on a boat for 2 weeks at a time or something?" So, and I don't remember his response exactly, but it wasn't like, no way. He was interested too. So I think that
So
just kind
you
of started.
threw out the first. You were the one who first threw it out. Yeah, that's what I was
It's
thinking.
hard to say, but
Yeah.
it was something that I remember thinking and saying. But we both then took courses together, like the Canadian Power and Sail Squadron courses, and learned together more about how to sail.
Mhm.
I needed to learn how to sail bigger boats, and he needed more of the theory, I suppose, that you get when you do the CYA courses and whatever. Anyway, so we built our skills together. We ended up getting a small catamaran that was an unplanned acquisition, but we looked in the penny saver and went, "Oh, look at this, let's just go take a look." And then we ended up getting that and sailed around that a little bit, just on the in London on the lake, I should say. And anyway, yeah, so then it just grew
Yeah,
together. And as to, I really don't think there was one of us in particular who said, "I really want to do this," and then the other one was like, let me think about it. It just
yeah.
evolved. The amount of time we wanted to spend on the water kind of grew. And yeah.
Nice. And so let's talk about this slide here. That's a sextant that you've got.
Mm-hmm.
And so how
So
often, go ahead.
you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, how often would you be taking fixings? Is it called fixings? Bearings?
A fix,
Sightings?
I guess.
Fix.
Not very often. Honestly, when we went offshore, especially initially, it kind of had this great idea after reading all kinds of things about people's adventures and journeys and so on. And I like the idea of being independent and being self-reliant. So I had this great idea that we might really use that a lot, but honestly, it's really tiring being at sea with just two people.
Yeah, I
And
can imagine.
I don't think we like, it just takes a lot of energy to do those things when you can just press the button on the GPS. So
Yes.
truthfully, we relied on the GPS, but we did think it was a good idea to at least have some basic understanding about how to do this. So Bjarne practiced a bit more than me, and I think he probably, on our first passage anyway, first few passages, he was probably doing it almost every day, trying to take a fix, maybe every second day. I didn't do it quite as often, but we did have a worksheet and I could muddle my way through it. So certainly not an expert, but at the time felt that I could probably figure it out if I really had to, because the GPS got fried or something.
Well, it looks very impressive. I've not learned to use one yet, so I was just very impressed. And there's a next one too, next slide. Provisioning and cooking is really, really important for boosting spirits and for really, meeting those basic human needs of food. I looked at this picture and I thought, oh, it just reminds me of the things that Trevor was talking about, how you get these wonderful things that you make and it just, perks you up or whatever. So I was wondering what the story behind this photo is. And maybe if you can share some more of your cooking experiences and what you did along the way to hone your skills, what you had in the galley, that sort of thing.
Let's see. Well, I don't know if I remember anything really specific about this particular picture, but certainly baking and baked goods is something that we both are quite fond of, and so are prone to do that. Both of us do baking and cooking. I take on more of the provisioning though, because I'm very interested in food and it really matters to me that we have what I think we want, what I want to have. And we usually have quite a bit more than what we need. But, and Bjarne is a little bit more, yeah, it'll work out. So it's not that he doesn't help with that, but I do take on more of that than he does.
And did you have a gas stove or how did you cook? How did you bake?
Our stove was propane.
Propane, yeah.
Yeah, and that this is on this picture's from our first offshore trip. So that we had quite a good size oven on that boat as well. Like you could fit, that's a normal cookie sheet size. You could fit that in the oven, which
Nice.
isn't always the case on a small boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if Bjarne mentioned, we don't have a fridge. So that affects provisioning. That's probably one of the biggest things that makes things interesting in a way, is just trying to figure out how to manage in that way. Yeah, sorry, it's kind of hard
So
to
would you
narrow
take,
that down,
would you take frozen,
what to say about food.
yeah, would you take frozen, or did you have a lot of tinned items? Would you take fresh and then switch over to tin when you ran out, or how did you manage your meal planning without a fridge?
Yeah, we had certainly some canned stuff and dehydrated things, and start out with fresh things, especially things like root vegetables,
Yeah.
and apples keep for a really long time. Actually, oranges keep quite well too. And especially, we learned more and more as we went over the years of how to keep things longer.
Right.
Like if you wrap some tissue around your tomatoes, then they keep better than when they're all smucked up together, or
Right.
things like that. So we certainly learned more about which foods last longer as we went along. But and then of course, if you're not on passage, if you're at anchor, you can often get stuff.
Right. Yes. Locally.
Although we were surprised when we got to the South Pacific, some of the atolls are not like Fiji is lush and there's all kinds of amazing things growing there, but some of the other places are quite dry, and the water just kind of runs through the coral atoll, the ground there, and they don't actually have a whole lot of those lovely fresh, what we think of as lovely fresh tropical vegetables and
Right. Okay.
and fruits. So there's I guess a bit of a mix about what you can get, but I mean,
Yeah.
people aren't starving, right? So
No.
if you have some flexibility there, but if there's things that are really important, I mean, we drink powdered milk when we're on the boat.
Okay. Okay.
We bake a lot. Bread's super important.
And tell us about the diving. Like Trevor mentioned that he goes diving. It's just so neat to see the two of you diving. And how often would you dive, and what kind of diving would you do, or have you done? Was it for like maintenance, checking the anchor, checking the hull, or
occasionally, but just for checking the hull, we don't really need the dive tanks for that.
okay,
The
right.
keel is that deep. You can just hold your breath, generally speaking. Yeah, mostly we didn't have a compressor on board, and so we don't have easy access to air, but sometimes we're from Fiji, and there was one place we were at where there was a larger boat than us who did have a compressor, and we, in exchange for air, we scraped some of their hull, I think,
Okay, cool.
Traded off, or sometimes we got air for like brownies or something, we just, because we like to bake and other people aren't necessarily doing that. So we did more snorkeling than diving, but when we could dive, we did. And we had 3/4 size tanks because our boat wasn't very big.
Right.
So that allowed us to at least, actually, I tell you, in my diving skills at the time got better for breath control, to have only a 3/4 tank, because you want your dive to last as long as you can. So it's like, okay, I don't really need to go quite that deep, so I can, keep my air longer and things like that. So
interesting. And there's another dive picture coming up. So what's this? This is some cave diving, or actually this is snorkeling.
This is snorkeling, and this is a place in Tonga. I think maybe it's called the Mariner's Cave or Cave, probably I think. And you swim, you go in and you swim underneath through a tunnel, and you end up in a big opening that is above.
Wow.
So you have to go underwater, but you come into this opening where there's air and there's water.
Cavern.
And it's completely enclosed. So it's really neat. A little bit scary to do that swim, but not that difficult really, although I gotta admit, I made Bjorn do it first and then come back and tell me how long I'd have to hold my breath for. So we go, but when you get into that cavern, the pressure difference as the waves come in, or the
Oh,
whatever, the
yes,
swell comes in,
yes.
the pressure changes, and when it goes out, it changes. So it fogs up and clears, and
Oh,
fogs up and
wow.
clears.
So interesting.
It was very neat.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, yeah. So here are some of the sea. Is this a coral?
I think it's a soft coral.
Oh, they're beautiful. And some other pictures too, just of this sea.
Yeah, I think that's a razor clam, I think.
Okay. And
So there's colorful ones, yeah, and that's a tridacna clam. The
okay.
South Pacific, some places anyways, have got some really amazing colors. Fiji especially, although I don't think that was Fiji, but Fiji especially was really quite remarkable.
And I think there's one
So of course,
more.
that was a
Oh,
number of years ago. Things are probably changing.
this is a little crab. That's
Yeah, just a little hermit crab.
cute. Okay, what's the story behind this one? This is just you sitting on the deck, just steering. You mentioned that you guys don't have a set watch. It really depends on, what the passage has been like, how tired you are. As far as it's not always rigid, 3 hours or 4 hours. You build in some
Right.
flexibility and
Yeah. Yeah, and that works okay for us. It wouldn't work for everybody. I wouldn't, everybody's different and how they are about those sorts of things. This is on Hokupa, our current boat, and we're
right.
heading. We're in the channel that's what are those islands off California? Channel Island. Okay, the Channel Islands. This is Santa Barbara Channel. I think we've just rounded one of the capes that's often very windy, and it was quite breezy that day, although beautiful blue sky and sunshine, as you can see.
Yes.
But boisterous. And we had the self-steering on, but we were having a little bit of trouble with it at that point because well, after we had a chance to assess it when we had the boat on the hard, some of the bearings were kind of worn out, and there was more play in it than would be ideal because it had been used a fair amount by that point.
Right.
So
Yes.
the hand on the wheel really is just kind of helping the self-steering a little bit to not get, because with the following sea, it never handled the following sea quite super awesome, I guess.
Okay. Okay. And did you start out nervous when you started taking these long passages, or is it something you were always comfortable with?
Well, I remember our very first overnight sail, which was from Killarney, I think, or anyways, in Lake Huron. And we headed out that evening just as the sun was setting, and coincidentally there was a piper there, and we were getting piped out, not really because of us, but it was just amazing. We were both so excited to go on our first night sail, and there was some nervousness about that and trepidation. That one sticks out for me, but the going on the long passages, and of course there is some nervousness, but like people often ask, well, I can't imagine not being able to see land, but that never really bothered me, that part. In fact, I feel more nervous where you can see land, because then I know there's things you can bump into.
Right.
The pointy bits, right, are associated with the land. So in some ways, being closer to land is a little scarier sometimes.
And actually, that reminds me, I was going to ask Bjarne a question earlier, and then it left my mind. The question was how often you would see other sailboats when you were making a passage. Was it because
yeah, I guess it just varied where we were on our first big passage down to Hawaii. We didn't see very much, a few, I think. But there was a ship that we had a nice conversation with, and we were about 5 days out of Hawaii, and he'd also done some sailing, and he offered to when he got to Hawaii to just let our main contact person know that we were still at sea and not drowned or anything.
Nice.
But normally that was an unusual encounter. Normally the ships ignore us and we ignore them. I think leaving Mexico, there was for a while we were in kind of a shipping lane. There was a fair number of ships.
Right.
It kind of varies. You could go
Right.
days and days without seeing any.
Let's see what we have next. And this is some sort of Fijian canoe. Is that, I think Bjarne mentioned it.
So possibly Tonga. I can't,
Okay.
I think maybe Tonga. But a traditional craft that was just on the beach. So
Okay,
there
this is
was
photo
just-
op then.
just
Okay.
goofing around.
Okay. And this, what's the story behind this picture here that you have on? This is your dinghy, right?
Yeah.
Here.
Let me just try to remember which. Okay, is this in Malau? Do you think, Bjorn? Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So when we were in Fiji, the people in Fiji, if I can generalize, were super friendly, really friendly. They're just more open and welcoming on average than in other places. Other, like in Tonga, they're fairly reserved. It's a little bit harder to interact. And I think we met possibly just one or two of these people, but we invited them to come to our boat the next day to see it. And the thing is that when you invite a person to do something in the South Pacific, you really actually end up inviting quite a lot of people, whether you realize it a lot. So there was quite a bit more people arrived than we realized, but that's okay. We managed.
Yeah.
We did sometimes like to invite people back to our boat because we didn't have compared to what people there have, we have a lot, but we didn't have a whole lot that we felt we could spare on our little boat.
Right.
We certainly weren't traveling at a high end level of budget. But one thing we could offer is to like show our boat and share our experiences if people were curious about it, or make popcorn for them on the boat, because some people in Fiji had never had, like kids that hadn't had popcorn, or so yeah, just to try to have something to offer, I guess. And it was interesting for us, of course, to
Very
meet the
interesting.
people.
Okay. And there's another one with, you said Bjarne was the one holding the camera, so that's why you were always the one with the dinghy. So, gorgeous sunset here. This is
This is in Suero, which is as far as I know, it's still true, a protected marine area as part of the Cook Islands.
okay.
And there's just a caretaker and a few family members at the time anyways living there.
Nice. Just beautiful. Some just gorgeous photos. And I think you mentioned this was Christmas. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. This was Christmas. So we put up our flags to decorate the boat and dressed up a little bit. And we're actually at Christmas Island there. So that was exciting for us, I guess, to be at Christmas Island on Christmas Day.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Okay. And this was a shadow of a bird flying by. It's so neat. Such a beautiful picture.
Thanks.
And yeah, so we'll get Bjarne to jump back in, and we'll have the two of you together, and we'll go through the last few slides together. And I guess this was on one of the islands. It's just a beautiful spot. Welcome back, Bjarne. We didn't say
anything. New Zealand. But
No,
it must be Fiji.
I think that's Fiji.
Yeah, it must be Fiji.
There was cheap haircuts there, and I remember I got my haircut for less than $2, and I think you did as well.
Yeah, I did get my haircut, and oh my gosh, it was so, I don't mind short, but it was so, I don't know, I just wasn't happy with that haircut. That was the worst haircut I probably had since I was like a teenager, and really fussed about it.
Okay. And here's another gorgeous sunset, and another gorgeous sunset.
Yeah, we would have a lot of social events on the beach, usually near sundown. If there was other boats in the anchorage, you would sort of congregate on the beach and toast the sun going down, and that was a lot of fun.
Nice. Now, have you kept in touch with any of the people that you met on your journeys?
A few, yeah, not tons, but a few, and some we took advantage of the opportunity to visit with them when we had our current boat down in Mexico, and we were driving down to the boat.
Oh, okay.
there's a couple of some American friends who were kind of on the route, so we were
Nice.
able to stop and visit
Very
some
nice.
of them.
Very nice. And this is just a beautiful spot, a beautiful photo.
Mhm.
That one's at Fanning
Tabuern.
Island, or Tabuern as it's called locally. You can see the seaweed farm there. They've got strings strung between the sticks in the water, and there's seaweed growing on the ropes.
Oh,
So
that's
that's the
what that
dark.
is. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And beautiful bay there that you're anchored in.
I'm thinking this is Mexico.
Yeah, that was in northern Sea of Cortez. We went up there one winter, and there wasn't many cruising boats in the northern sea at that time because the water is fairly cold. It's about 16, 17 degrees.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of the anchorages we had to ourselves.
Nice, beautiful. And this is a gorgeous photo. That's down in Mexico as well?
This is actually New Zealand. So
Oh,
this is on Freya, and this is called the Hole in the Wall. I think it's a fairly, if you're in New Zealand, it's a fairly well-known landmark.
Okay.
We just had to get a photo of that, so I hopped in the dinghy and Barb did a bunch of sail bys to
Oh, nice. Very
try to get
nice.
just the right shot there. Yeah.
So I'm not, I think we're getting close to the end. I wanted to ask what's next on the sailing agenda for the two of you? Have you got some plans? Is there something on the bucket list, or is it just what, you know, what comes your way? Like,
I think for now, especially with COVID and the world the way it is, that we'll just do sailing around BC. There is lots that we haven't seen yet, but also places that we can easily see a lot more of. I think this summer we'll try to get out to the west coast of Vancouver Island, spend some time in the Broken Group and around there, Tofino and that kind of thing.
nice.
Neither of us have been to Haida Gwaii, that area. That's another
Oh,
possible
lovely.
place to go explore. There's lots to see and do. We had thought we would go to French Polynesia again because when we went the first time, did you already say this?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
When we went the first time on Freya, we had very little time there just because of when we left and so on. So we thought we'd go back, but then we were going to do that, but then COVID hit, and then we decided it was better to sail our boat home instead of to some country that might not let us in, and so on and so on. So and that's okay.
Okay, let's see what we have. Oh, I think this might be close to the end. I was wondering whether sailing, whether you had times where it was difficult to be that close in such confined quarters, close quarters with each other for so long. Was that something you had to learn to adjust to, or I'm asking you to share your dirty laundry here, but what advice what advice do you have for people who might be considering this? Like, is it has it brought you closer together, these journeys? Do you start off, you know, is it, you know, forming, storming, norming, and performing, just, you know, like you learn in the military? Or
there's definitely aspects of that. We both had to adapt to the living in close quarters, and I'm sure there was times when Barb's would have happily tossed me overboard, but then she would have had to take all the watches, so you can't do that. We have a pretty egalitarian role division on the boat. Like
okay.
we actually both consider ourselves captain
nice
in the sense that whoever is on the helm is the person who knows the most about the situation, the current what's happening, and so that person is the captain. They have the say as to what's going on, but the other person would have veto power for big decisions in that unless it was an emergency. So like if we're discussing going to island A or island B, that's a group decision for us. But yeah, if something was happening immediately, then the person at helm would be the captain. He wouldn't feel obliged to wake up the other person to ask, "Do you think I should change sails?" or do you think I should
changing sails
avoid
on your
this
own,
rock, that sort of thing. So, yeah, we would. It's actually funny because when you're sleeping down below, it is actually quite noisy. There's constant motion of the waves hitting the hull, and it's things that are creaking, or that little can that you couldn't quite find in the locker that's rattling around. But you would quite quickly wake up when something out of the ordinary, some sound would happen that wasn't normal, and that sound would often be like the sound of the shackle on the harness dragging across the deck as the other person's walking up to the foredeck to change the sail or stuff.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Having said that, I'd say we usually, especially on Freya, we didn't have roller furling. We would often change sail together. But what Bjarne is saying is, it's not like if I thought we needed to change the sail, then I'd say I'd wait if I thought we could, if Bjarne was sleeping. But if I didn't think we could wait, then I'd say I need some help changing the sail.
Right.
Not,
yeah.
Can you give me permission to change the sail or something
Right.
like
Yeah.
that? So
yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
I think
anything else?
Oh, you asked. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
I was gonna say-
you just asked about the getting along. I think that for us, we spent a lot of time together anyway. Maybe a bit less now. Our interests diverge a bit more, but especially in those early days when we were really focused on getting the boat ready and learning a lot of stuff about sailing and voyage making and so on. We like tend to walk to the grocery store together. Like, we spend a fair amount of time together anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it was a less adjustment for us then. I did observe other couples that had that they had very separate lives. Their work was very separate, and our work was separate, but nonetheless, they somehow just didn't have a lot of hours together due to whatever. And then they got on the boat, and it was quite a huge adjustment for them. So I guess if you're just in that regard, it's maybe advice, I suppose, if couples aren't sure about how that might be, is to spend a lot of time together.
Yeah.
And see how that is before you get on the boat.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. To start getting used to being around one another for forever, continuously. Okay. Is there
But
any?
we had different approaches
Yeah.
to things, and that took some figuring out. But.
Is there anything else you want to share? This has been a wonderful interview. It's just so interesting. It's just amazing, really, that the two of you have gone so far, and it's just crossing the huge ocean like that. Just the two of you. It's just amazing. Absolutely incredible.
Well, thanks. One thing I'd like to say is that you commented on gender roles and how sometimes that gets quite. And something that really pushes my buttons is when people talk about pink jobs and blue jobs, and but there is a lot of that actually in the world, and certainly on boats. And I mean, to some degree, our roles fall a little bit that way, because Bjarne is an engineer and I'm a social worker, and he's better and he's electrical guy, so he does the electrical stuff, and it's really easy for me to not bother to worry about that, since I know that he's competent and doing it all very well, things like that. So it can fall that way a little bit, but I really think that it's important, if you're okay, I don't like to tell people what to do, but I do think it's a good idea if everybody who's on a boat, especially if it's just shorthand, 2 or 3 people on a boat, then it's really good if everybody can do the basic stuff at least. And I took an engine maintenance course before we left, so that I could feel at least reasonably comfortable to figure things out, and I'd be able to read Nigel Calder and actually understand a little bit about about it. I mean, I don't always know what the problem is by a long shot, but I felt like I could figure it out, and I can change the oil, and it just seemed important to me to have a certain level of competency about those things. And I don't think you have to know how to do every single thing, but I really do think people should have some basic understanding about how to figure out what to do with the sails and basic navigation, and just be able to function, because you never know when somebody else might become debilitated or fall overboard or whatever, right?
Exactly. The idea, well, you mentioned that you took the courses together, you took your training together, and Trevor was saying that they took their training together too. So I think that's really, really important when you're traveling together, because you just never know, as you say, if someone's going to become incapacitated. It can happen at any time. So wow.
But It's also good for often women who are the ones, if they're the ones who are not very familiar with the sailing, it's really a great idea. And if they're thinking of going off cruising, a really great idea for them to actually do a course on sailing separate from their partner,
Oh, do
because
it on their own. Yes.
it can be difficult to learn when maybe the habit is to defer to the person who knows more. So if you're on a course separate from them, like an actual course, like a CYA kind of course where you're on the boat and doing things, and
Mhm.
and they make you bring the boat to the dock and all that stuff. If your spouse is there, it can depending on the relationship and all that, it can affect how much the person's able to take in. So
Yeah.
people can learn sometimes better separately. Occasionally, it depends.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. That's great advice. Anything else? Anything you want to add, Bjorn, to that? To our
Um,
yeah.
it's a big wide world out there, and I love seeing it. Barb and I are particularly loving the sea life and all the the wildlife encounters we have. But there's lots of reasons to go cruising, and I'm sure that someone can find something special out there.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully you'll share some of your experiences and photos of your trip around Vancouver Island and Haida Gwaii, etc. It sounds wonderful. So let me see if we have any more slides here. I think we might have one or two. What's the story behind this one?
That was the day before we left Fiji for Samoa. Every
Fall.
Yeah, every fall there's a lunar timed spawning of the little worms called pololo in the area in the coral reefs. And if you head out and actually snorkel or just hang out near the water during that spawning period, it's actually quite neat to see. But unfortunately, the day we went out, and I guess the worms had decided it wasn't quite time yet. So we just got some nice some dawn views of the beach, but we didn't go in the water and see any pololo worms. The locals will pick them off the beach from the surf line, and they'll eat them. They consider them a delicacy.
Oh, really? Ugh.
I think a really good source of protein for them.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, that wraps up our interview. I really want to thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It sounds absolutely fabulous, and I really appreciate all the time that you've taken out of your schedule today to join us. I will post the video, and hopefully we'll build this passion for sailing in our class for those who want to, one story at a time. So, okay, well,
And
I will.
Sorry, I was going to say, feel free to share our website with folks too.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah,
please send it to me. And when I post it, I will add that to it. That sounds like a fabulous idea. Okay,
Sure.
let me see if I can
Thanks,
figure
Charlene.
out how to stop this video. Thanks again, and bye for now.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Charlene.
Okay. I think it's going to take me a little while. I'm still a work in progress on all of this.
It is recording.
Yes, and I can't remember how to stop. So anyway, we will figure it out. I guess I can always just cut the tape. Shift. Okay. Oh, why does it do this to me? Oh, I guess I'll have
There's
to.
a little button at the bottom that.
Oh,
that
here
you
we
should
are.
be able to
Here we
press.
are. Okay. Bye for now. Signing out.
Okay.